All right, there we go. Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, July 22nd. Time for another Watercooler Wednesday, joined as always by Dwayne Gibbs. Dwayne, what's happening?
Hey, good morning.
I've got a pretty interesting topic here, and it just, a lot of these topics just come from stuff that I encounter or think about through the week, and I've just been noticing a certain lack of something from some beginners and some even industry professionals. And it really just it confounds me. I just don't understand why people are lacking this certain concept that I'm going to get into today. Again, it's as an instructor, it's the first thing that I develop with people. And I don't see anybody else doing that. And it shows, on buyers and sellers of notes alike, and even people in third-party skilled position, title companies and real estate agents and folks like that. And I'll start, I guess, by doing kind of an analogy. Now, if you're watching this, I know some of you have just listened to this on the podcast, Real Estate Without Renters show, and that's great. So I'll describe it to you for those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel or live here on social media. Behind Dwayne there, he's got the Baltimore Orioles shirt and some pictures there on baseball, and Dwayne played baseball at a pretty high level. So Dwayne, if I'm a new coach and I've got I'm instructed with teaching these prospective baseball players, and all I do is talk about hitting home runs and all the great grand slams and what we can do. And I just talk about those big picture things. And I just tell everybody without instruction, just, hey, go up there and just keep hitting the ball, just keep hitting the ball and let's go for homers, on every time. Uh, that team is not going to be successful. We're going to hit a homer every once in a while, but we're going to lose every freaking game uh, because of one big issue. And the way I'm hypothetically teaching that team. What's the big thing? And I'll just do it in baseball because you know baseball, but pretty much any sport, any skill set. What's the thing that you really have to learn to have something solid throughout the your skill set?
There's, I mean, you have to understand the basics and the mechanics of the game.
The fundamentals.
Total fundamentals, yes,
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, you played again at a high level. How much time did you guys spend on fundamentals?
all the time.
That was it, right? That was the whole practice. Fundamentals, fundamentals, fundamentals. Okay, now let's play a couple innings, right? But I would have to guess, and again, you played at that level, but 90% fundamentals, 80?
Uh, I would I would say at least 85, 90% fundamentals.
Yeah. And breaking it down to the details, right? I mean, hey, you're not standing right. Put your foot here. Put your hands here. Hold your grip up a little higher. Turn your head like this. Here's how you run bases. Here's how far you lead off. I mean, just that's where the real skill set comes in, right? You're teaching the very, fine points of the game to the point where they become instinct. Yes?
Absolutely. And so, matter of fact, that you say that, there was a game last night that has been showing up all this morning on Get Up. I watch that every single morning with sports. And so it was a game between St. Louis and LA last night. And actually, it was Philadelphia and
St.
Los
Louis.
Angeles
Oh,
Dodgers.
okay.
Sorry. And so there was a rundown. There was a guy on second and third. The guy from third came home. He got in a caught of a rundown. The guy from second advanced to third, and he really thought the guy was going to make it back, but he didn't. And so he got caught running back to second. Well, fundamentals, he should have just stayed there, took the out from the guy making it because they needed the two more outs and then the game was over. He should have just stayed on third. So
Yeah.
fundamentals, stay advanced, don't go back. Even though it looks like, and you're called on that rundown, that was
Yeah.
a fundamental play. He
Yeah.
should have stayed right there on third. He was unsure if the guy was really going to make it back, but it looked like it. Well, you don't know. Suppose he tripped. Okay.
Yeah.
Stay advanced. You're then that would only take one out away, and you could still have a potential of somebody hitting a ball and that guy advancing home, and so be it, they could win the game. But instead, he turned it into a double play. That's not fundamentals.
Yeah. Yeah. So if he stayed on third, everybody, yourself included, would have said that was a smart play,
Yes, he should have
right?
just stayed there
Yeah.
because
Smart. Yeah.
all the commentators last night were saying, "Man, the guy's so brilliant. He's a brilliant base runner.
Yeah.
He just had a moment, and when he got tagged, he was like this, and he knew he should have
Yeah.
just stayed there on third and not
Yeah.
gone back." So again, it's funny that you bring this story up because that just happened last night.
Yeah, so it is, and I think you'll find that in certainly any sport, it's kind of obvious. You see the golfers. We were watching the Open, and the golfer's just out there working on the driving range, working on the driving range, and working on the putts, working on the chips, all the fundamentals, trying from every different angle. So what you're trying to do is build up that muscle memory, and it works the same way really in business and in investing, and in particular in the note investing field, which is what I specialize in. I see it all the time, and I can tell when somebody lacks that basic information about the industry, and it always baffles me. But in reality, the other thing is, I know a lot of the other people who train in this business. Not that there's a lot of them, but I know who they are. I'm fairly familiar with their material. Dwayne probably knows more than I mean, you probably know a lot more on that side and seen everybody else's training, I would imagine. Um, but I don't see anybody teaching the fundamentals. It's all that hit for a home run, flashy kind of stuff, and that's the only thing they teach. And then, you wonder why, gee, this person's really paralyzed on buying anything because they don't know, they want they have this idea of what it is, but they haven't been taught in the fundamental skills, and therefore they're lacking the understanding. And if you don't have confidence, if you don't have the answers in your head, you're just not going to move forward.
See,
A
this is
confused mind is not going to continue on. A confused mind is going to go like, you know what, I'm going to pass on this deal and come up with some kind of excuse versus really kind of noodle something through. Or they're going to go the opposite direction of just going, well, I'm just going to close my eyes and swing for the fences here and hope it works out. And sometimes, it does, and a lot of times it doesn't. But number wise, over a period of time, you'll lose every time if you don't have that fundamental. That's when things start to crumble.
yeah. So my theory is the reason that happens is because they're trying to make themselves sometimes like they have to come up, they have to one up their audience and show them how smart they really are to
Hmm.
where, oh, I never heard that. I never heard that. And then versus going somebody that's just teaching the basics. I mean, you talked about fundamentals in Tiger's heyday. He talked about hitting 1,000 golf balls from the driving range before and after an entire match. And
Yeah,
so, I mean, and again, it's just muscle memory. How hard is it to hit a
yeah,
golf ball? But what he did was he was just training himself of I want to fade, I want to hook, I want to be able to slice the ball. I need a low runner, I need to hit a high drive shot, whatever that is, and he just practiced that. That's not fun. I mean,
yeah,
but that's what he did to become the best. And I think so many people look at, oh, I'm working with this person because they teach me this, this, and this. Well, if you can't master the fundamentals, there's no way, no different than playing baseball. You're in
yeah,
college and you want to make it to the pros. It's really hard to make that next advance, whether it's in any pro sport. So you have to be really good
yeah,
at the basics to be consistent, to show great numbers, to show improvement before you can raise. And I think that says the same thing about the training in the note business. I mean, why aren't you doing more deals? That's the question that I have with people. How come you're not doing more deals? Well, I lost out because I didn't see this. Why didn't you see this? Well, it was something new that I saw. Well, that was a basic situation that you should have noticed. And then I talk to them about, you are, I say it all the time. I've said it as long as we've known each other. You are the best in the business of being able to do due diligence. I've said it. I can tell you 100 people, give you their names, numbers of who said that. Kevin
Mhm.
is the most methodical person at looking at doing deals and what could go wrong and putting people in situations to where, listen, you may not win every single time, but I'm going to minimize that risk and maximize that rate of return because I've done my due diligence.
Yeah.
Look at Babe Ruth. He hit more home runs than anybody else, but he struck out more than anybody else. Why?
Mhm.
Because he just stayed to the basics.
Mhm.
No different than the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay Packers, their whole mindset was block and tackle, block and tackle. That's how you win football games.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, that's
See
just
what happened there, everybody. I
basic.
got I got I got Dwayne talking about sports now.
Yeah, no, no, yeah, I probably should hush. I'll use up the rest of the time, but
No, all good. Uh, but yeah, everything you said true, and swinging it back to real estate, it's like think of it this way, if you build a house on soft sand, you don't have a solid foundation. That house might look pretty for a while, but at some point in time, it's going to come crumbling down, So that's why we have strong foundation. So if you think of these fundamentals as a foundation for what you're going to build your business upon, it will serve you well into the future, keep you safe, and keep you maximizing your returns and minimizing your risk. So, in the spirit of that, I'm going to hit you up with some slides here today on just that, on the fundamentals. And I'll tell you, every deal that you buy, whether it's performing, non-performing, sub-performing, anything in between, anything note related, and really by extension, real estate related, if it will contain these fundamentals. It just will. So it just makes sense if you're going to be in an industry, know the foundational skills of what this is. Now, what comes to the forefront for the note investor is understanding then what we are buying. We are buying contracts. That's what we are buying. What do those contracts represent? What's the responsibility of both parties, borrowers as well as lenders? What are their rights and obligations within those contracts? You see, that's where all these skill sets really start. It's not just buying a note. It's like, well, what does that note represent? It's in the details, and that's what you have to understand. So, I know that a lot of people don't understand even our normal, everyday mortgage industry transactions. How do I know that? Because I hear the phrase all the time where somebody goes, I want to buy a house. I have to go to a bank and give them a mortgage, or I have to get I have to get a mortgage. I got to get a mortgage from the bank. I got to get a mortgage from Rocket Mortgage. I got to get a more. You're not getting a mortgage from a bank. You are giving a mortgage to a bank to get a loan. To get a loan, you have to promise to pay it back, and you have to back up that promise with the security agreement that says, if I break my written promise, you get to foreclose on me. That's what a note and a mortgage is. So you're giving a mortgage to a bank or lender or private lender in exchange for getting capital or cash to buy the property. Okay. So that's just one of those key indicators when I hear people speaking in that verbiage of how it works. So let's just break it down to the very basics. And again, this stuff should be taught in school. It's not. So I totally get it. All right. So how do we get to a loan in the mortgage industry in the United States? Well, we have to fill out an application. That application generally comes along with a fee. So they can do due diligence, they can do underwriting, they can see how much income that you make, they can run your debt to income numbers, your ratios and all those sorts of things. We can do that too in the private note industry, but I'm going to stick on just the traditional U.S. mortgage industry right now. The borrower then gives the note and mortgage, what we also call the paper, to the lender. Okay, which in this example is going to be a bank. Once again, you're giving your promise, you're giving the security of that promise by pledging the property as collateral. That's what a mortgage is. It's a pledge. You are pledging that property as collateral to get the money. So you get the deed to the property, or in some cases, it's held on your behalf. We'll get into that in just a minute. And then the lender actually sells the paper on the secondary market. Now, a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people might say, "Yeah, I know how to get a loan. I fill out an application, right? I sign the paperwork. Okay, you got me on a technicality given. Okay, I got it. But yes, and I get the deed to the property." So people have a general understanding of that point, but they don't know what goes on behind the scenes. When this paper is created, the banks will immediately sell that paper on the secondary market. And they sell it, by the way, at a discount, everybody. They sell it at a discount. When we buy private notes, guess what we buy them at? We buy them at a discount, meaning they're sold at a discount to us. There's a reason why it's sold at a discount. The banks already know what that discount is, by the way. So as soon as they create that paper, they know what they can immediately turn around and sell it to Fannie and Freddie. If you don't know who Fannie and Freddie are, you will shortly. Okay. And typically, then the lender or the bank will retain what's called the servicing rights because most people's mortgage payment is not just principal and interest, it's usually principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Sometimes it's principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, as well as servicing fees. Okay. So there may be FHA insurance in there as well. So the monthly payment that you're making includes several ingredients. So the lenders will retain that servicing right and they will collect that money and divvy it up how it's supposed to be accounting wise. Hold escrow over here, send the payments, by the way, to Fannie and Freddie. So the paper generally then is what they call securitized. All right. So they take that paper, they turn it into a security sometimes, and it's sold in bulk versus just one-off individual notes. And that's how our whole system works behind the scenes here. So there's a big paper shuffle, and there's a reason why the banks do that, which I'll illustrate through pictures here, which is a little easier to learn from, to show you why banks and why we have come up with this system in the United States. It doesn't work this way everywhere, by the way. It doesn't work this way in Canada. That's why I teach Canadians how to invest in the United States. And guess what? I have to teach them how a mortgage system works. It's different up there. Okay. So typical home purchase in pictures within the US, you got a property buyer, you got a property seller. Property buyer generally gives some kind of money in the form of a earnest deposit, down payment, that sort of thing to the property seller. And then the property buyer goes to a bank. And they have to do what? They have to promise to pay it back. That's your note. They also have to have a security instrument called a mortgage. That says if I don't pay you back, you have the right to foreclose. And the bank gets that. The bank is going to hold on to that. And what do? They pay money on that borrower's behalf. And the property seller gets cashed out of the deal. Okay, pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Now, what happens again behind the scenes is now that the bank owns this note and mortgage, what do they do with it? Well, as I said, they turn around and sell that to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and sometimes Ginnie Mae as well. These are all government, quasi privately owned entities. Okay, so Fannie Mae is the Federal National Mortgage Association, Freddie Mac is the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. Ginnie Mae is like the government mortgage something or other. All right, so we've got the three. These are traditionally the big two. So the bank then will sell the note and mortgage to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac at a discount, by the way, in exchange for what? For cash. Okay, and they're going to retain those servicing rights. So the bank really is making their money by creating the paper, getting whatever fees that they get up front in creating the paper, turn around, sell the paper to Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac to get more cash to do what? To do more loans. They're also making money by retaining these servicing rights because as you pay your taxes and insurance, that money's not due every month to the county for property taxes or to the insurance company for the property insurance. Instead, that's due once or twice a year. So the bank gets what we call float. You send them your money, they're holding it in escrow. They have these escrow accounts where they're making interest off of. Hard to lose on that. That's not their money. They're just holding it and just making all the interest off of your money. Now multiply that times hundreds of millions of people, and that is a heck of a lot of money. So that's where the banks are really doing it, and it's a very fluid system as long as Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have money and have shareholders and investors that are capitalize them to buy that, and as long as people are paying their mortgage payments. Okay. So where the big crash happened was people weren't making the mortgage payments because interest rates were up. Fannie and Freddie were dying on the vine. They weren't getting paid. They had to sell all the notes. And that's why we had a big inventory of non-performing notes, by the way. All right. So the pass through then is done because now the buyer simply makes principal, interest, taxes, and insurance over to the bank. And then the bank pays the principal and interest portion to Fannie and Freddie. They just pass it through. So again, they're acting as a servicing company. They pass through the principal and interest. They hold on to the taxes and insurance. That's the whole system. And most people don't even know that. It's very important because this, even though I'm talking about the traditional mortgage industry, this carries over to private financing as well, because we do have servicing companies. And guess what the servicing companies do? They collect principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. What do? They hold escrow and they pass through the principal and interest to us. So it's a mirror of this system in many ways. And again, that's one of the reasons why you have to understand that and have to understand why there's discounts and why these things are done that particular way. Now, how this is done varies by state. Okay, so when it comes to this type of transaction where you're buying real estate, you're borrowing money, and you're pledging it as collateral, state laws have different interpretations of how that should work. Okay, so there are states typically east of the Mississippi, because that's kind of where our country started. And those states treat these instruments as liens. Okay. So what that looks like is the property seller in a lien state actually owns the deed to the property. Possesses it is a much better word. They possess the deed. And I like to use that word possess because somewhere along the line, one of the foundational skills we did get in school somewhere is that possession is what?
Nine
Nine
tenths
tenths
of
of
the
the law. Everybody knows that for some reason, right?
It's like your
So
social security number.
yeah. So if a property seller possesses the deed, that's one thing. There's another way where they don't possess the deed, and I'll do that in just a minute. But you can see just with that, there's a big difference between the two. So in a lien theory state, the property seller possesses the title, the deed, which is the title to the property, uh, in their possession. So a property buyer comes along and they're going to buy this property over here. They're going to give, earnest money deposit, that sort of thing. They're going to go to the bank. They're going to give the bank the note and the mortgage in exchange for money, right? So the money is paid by the bank on behalf of the property buyer over to the property seller. And what does the property seller do? They deed the property over to the new property buyer. So the property buyer now possesses the title to that property, but there is a lien on it. There's a claim on it. There's an entitlement on it that says, hey, don't forget though, you promised to pay back the $100,000 that we lent you. And you also said if you don't pay us monthly payments like you're supposed to, if you don't meet the agreements, the contractual agreements of the note, we will enforce that security agreement and foreclose upon that property. And in a lien state, that foreclosure would be judicial. Okay. Why would a foreclosure be judicial? Well, possession is nine tenths of the law. If you have broken your contract with the bank by not paying the note and they enforce the mortgage agreement, they are coming after your property through a forced action called a foreclosure. Right? But what they're seeking is the deed, the title to that property. The property buyer, the borrower, possesses that. So if they possess it, we got to sue them to get it back. Okay, that's why it becomes a judicial foreclosure because they possess it. Therefore, we have to sue them. They will have their day in court. to get that property back. The lawsuit is going to take longer and cost more money. Simple. So if you understand these when you're looking at buying a note, right away, just understanding what type of security agreement is it, and is this in a lien state or a deed state, you will already know what your foreclosure process might have to be. Okay. And then it's very easy from there to look that up either on AI, Google search it, and just say, what is the process in the state? Tell me in time and money. Boom. Now you have a bigger picture of what goes on just with that little skill set there. But not all states are lien states. A lot of states are deed states. And deed states interpret a little bit differently on how this whole arrangement should work. So in this case, you got a property seller, you got a property buyer. Same thing. Property buyer is going to give some money in the form of earnest money deposit, etc. And then they're going to go to a bank. They're going to sign a note and a deed of trust. Okay. A deed of trust is a type of mortgage. Okay. But not all mortgages are deeds of trust. Okay. So a deed of trust, when you see that, the key words there, deed of trust, means it's going to be held. The ownership of the property, the deed, is going to be held by a third party called a trustee. Okay. So you'll notice that the property buyer in this case does not get possession of the property. Money is still paid off to the property seller, but they get the house, they get the possession of the house and everything else, but the deed is maintained with the trustee. Very important distinction, because now if the property buyer defaults on that note, they don't live up to the obligations of the note, they're going to enforce the deed of trust. And the deed of trust says, okay, we have the right to sell the property. So they just have to go to the trustee, the third party, licensed in that state, go to the trustee and show that there's a default that has occurred and that they want to enforce the language of the deed of trust and have that property sold at a foreclosure sale. The trustee's obligation is to go to the property buyer and go, hey, they're showing us here that you haven't paid and they're going to enforce this deed of trust. Can you show us that any proof that they're wrong and you have made these payments? And if they can't do that, the trustee then simply says, go ahead and sell the property at a foreclosure auction. So it's foreclosed, it's sold at an auction, just like a judicial, but this one is non-judicial. Okay? They didn't get their day in court. They had the right to show proof that they did make the payments. If they can't do that, the trustee just schedules the sale. Okay? So it's much quicker in doing it that way. It costs less money in doing it that way. And it all comes why? Because they didn't possess the deed. The deed was held in trust for them to an obligated party that has to surrender that deed if the property buyer doesn't live up to their obligation, which is in the note and the deed of trust instrument. Much quicker, much easier. Okay. So all notes then, all real estate notes have three components. There's the loan agreement. Okay. That's the note. That's backed up by some form of a security agreement, which again could turn into judicial or non-judicial based upon that security agreement. Is it a mortgage or is it a deed of trust? Okay, judicial, non-judicial, and then of course the ownership document. What is the ownership document and who holds that? Who possesses that document? And that's what we look at in all these transactions. Now, there is a hybrid that you will run into in the seller finance world that you will not run into in the traditional mortgage world. But we're going to have to save that for another day because that's a whole other topic right there. But that's how the industry works. The seller finance world will mirror how those things work, but the skill sets and the understanding of how those instruments act and what they do in every state is consistent throughout the United States. It's up to you in doing your due diligence to evaluate that because that could and should probably affect your discount. It's at least one of the considerations when you're doing your due diligence, when you're weighing out how much you're willing to pay for this note, you're weighing out your risk tolerance, reward, you're looking at your discount, all those items, and you start to weigh that out. This is one of those components that you look at. So, for example, I will not buy notes in New York. Flat out not interested. I don't care what kind of return you're telling me it has. I don't care. Why? Because I know in New York, they are a state that allows both judicial and non-judicial, by the way. Their law allows for both. But because the law allows for both, most of what you see are non-judicial. In fact, the closer to New York City that you are, where there's more attorneys, it's always non-judicial. Okay, out in the country, sometimes in New York, you might have some more traditional mortgages there, but for the most part in New York, even though the law allows both, they default to a deed of trust, or sorry, they default to mortgage. Okay, and the mortgages there, it takes 5 years to foreclose. Okay, 5 years to foreclose. So I think I missaid some things on there. So with New York, it's more mortgages. Sorry about that. I think I said deed of trust. In New York, it's more mortgages that you're going to run into. And as a result of that, they are judicial and it takes you up to 5 years. Okay. I'm not going to do that. And why? Because if I buy a note and it goes into default, I'm looking down a 5 year road. And believe me, somehow or another, the borrowers find that out. They find it out. A neighbor, an attorney, title company, real estate agent, relative, somebody tells them, don't be a sucker. You can stay in the house for free for up to 5 years, not pay a dime. There's not a thing that lender can do because they have to go through this ridiculous red tape judicial foreclosure process that is not only going to take you 5 years, but it's going to cost you well over $5,000 now to do. Not interested. So Georgia, on the other hand, they have another little bit of a hybrid called a security deed, which is really more of a deed of trust. They take about 90 days. Okay. So again, these are just fundamental things that other people simply don't teach, but you can see where it would have a dramatic effect on where you might invest in things. I mean, somebody might be dangling a 15% yield in New York on a deal, and there's somebody else with just a 10% yield in Georgia, and let's say everything else is very similar, your ratios and everything else. It's just that its returns are a little bit different. I'm buying Georgia all day long. Are you kidding me? I'll take a 10% safer investment, shorter term foreclosure, shorter downside than 15%, because the 15% is if they pay. If they don't pay, 5 years, and now I'm just not making any money for 60 months on my note buy? No way. Can't do it. So a lot to be said about these understandings. And when I'll do maybe next week, we'll do contract for deeds a little bit for everybody because it is a singular topic and it still throws people off to this day. But you're going to run into them if you're in this business, and you should understand them and what the benefits are, what the potential drawbacks are.
I think as simple as this may sound for people that have experience in the business, there are a lot of people that say they have a lot of experience in the business and sometimes having a hard time of of teaching it, because it's very important to know.
Hmm.
It is the basics and it's what people need to know to become good note buyers.
Yeah.
And I like that you teach this. I like that. I wish more people did. They get so tied up in semantics about different strategies
Yeah.
where the
Show me
basic
how to make
is,
money. Show me how to make money. Show me how to
yeah,
make money.
yeah.
I just showed you how to make money. I know it doesn't look like. I think that's what you're saying, Dwayne. Is like, yes, this isn't like that. Whoo, that's a cool topic, sort of thing. But I'm telling you
Listen,
what,
a lot of people
this
don't
is what
like
makes you
math,
money right here. Yeah, go ahead.
No question. But having math is definitely going to teach you how to make money, knowing math the right way, being
Yeah,
creative about math. And
yeah,
so I think this was a great topic. I think it's definitely one that people need to go back and watch for sure.
yeah. Very good. Awesome. All right, everybody, want to learn more? Please visit KevinShortle.com, kevinshortel.com. Get the book, Real Estate Without Renters. You can get that right on Amazon if you'd like. That'll give you a great introduction into the industry. Send us an email, info@kevinshortel.com, and Dwayne will follow up with you. Even set up a free phone call with you. Just talk through it, see what we can do to either get you going in the business, or we run into a lot of people who just, again, they've been so-called trained, but not at a level that they can actively participate safely into notes. And they found her, or they've kind of fumbled around. We can get you back on track very
Also,
quickly.
if you have a topic that you want to talk about, or you have come across a note situation that you're dealing with, let me know. I'll bring it to Kevin, and we can use it for a training on an episode and help you walk through something.
Yep, sounds good. All right, everybody. Until next time, live lucky. See you later.